"You're still the dumb one," Dad said, over steak while I sent $1,200 per month for 3 years. So, I froze the accounts, called my lawyer, evict them. My name is Lel, and I am 32. I have no degree, no framed paper on the wall, no alumni sticker on my bumper, and no stories about dorm room mayhem or campus nights. With just a GED, a lot of late nights, and a bank account, the individuals who used to humiliate me began calling me family again. For years, I told myself that was enough, that success would speak louder than whatever they were saying behind my back. Turns out I was mistaken, or perhaps just naive. It occurred last Friday during dinner in the home I purchased for them. A property with granite countertops, designer furniture, and that dumb wine fridge my mother insisted on. All of it was paid in full under my name, but never recognized. We were eating steaks I had picked up on the way, grilled medium rare, just the way Dad likes them, with a bottle of something imported that Mom had underlined in a magazine but conveniently forgot to get. I didn't want to stay long. I simply wanted to show up, keep the peace, check on the repairs they'd been ignoring, and make sure the thermostat hadn't been turned up to loud levels again. Dinner started out good, tight as normal, but silent. My sister Petra was also there. 29, too, still unemployed, and perhaps more condescending than ever. She primarily glanced through her phone while Mom whined about how difficult life is these days, and Dad complained about the cost of groceries, as if he wasn't getting half his fridge delivered on my dime every week. Then something happened. We were halfway through dessert, a store-bought pie I brought because Mom said she didn't have time to bake, when Dad set down his fork and poked it in my direction. "You know," he added, raising his voice just enough to attract attention, "he might pay the bills around here, but let's not forget he's still the dumb one without a degree." It took me a second to process that. The air became still. Petra snorted into the glass. Mom didn't even blink and sipped her wine as if she were watching a replay. And me? I merely stared at the slice of pie that I was no longer hungry for. I did not say anything. Not at first. I let the silence linger as my head buzzed like a wasp nest. All those years of sacrifice, working 12-hour shifts, teaching myself coding at night, staying on couches while sending them money for theirs, all culminated in a single crushing moment of shame. And the worst part, they did not even flinch. None of them felt they had done anything wrong. I stood up silently, moved my dish to the sink, rinsed it, and dried my hands. Then I grabbed my keys, said, "Thanks for dinner," and left. It wasn't until I was in my car, motor still turned off, hands on the steering wheel, that it hit me. This was not new. It wasn't a mistake or an insensitive joke. This has been going on for years. Every holiday, every visit, and every text message that said, "Can you help with this bill?" came with no thank you. Everyone makes fun of me for not being educated enough. Every expectation that I just keep providing, spending, and turning up because what else was I good at? That night, I sat on the couch in my downtown apartment, the one no one ever asks about, and opened my laptop. I did not anger. I did not cry. I just sat there motionless and quiet, like a surgeon about to perform the first incision. The first plug I pulled was a tiny one. The automatic grocery orders I had set up with Instacart were no longer there. The second was a Netflix account. Then there were the services I'd been covering under my name, such as water and electricity, as well as the internet, where Dad used to watch his sports every night. I did not cancel them outright. Not yet, but I fixed the end dates and ensured that the following billing cycle was their responsibility. Then I opened the shared cloud account I had set up for Mom, which had all of her images saved up. I was not cruel. I did not delete anything, but I did disable my access, lock it down, and change the recovery information. For once, they would have to figure out their own passwords. Next, I stared at the banking app. My stomach turned. There it was. The automatic transfer I'd been making to help pay down my second mortgage. They never told me they had refinanced $1,200 every month for the past 3 years. I canceled it with a single click. Still, I wasn't finished. I opened the document. That made my skin crawl every time I looked at it. A power of attorney form I signed during Dad's health scare 2 years ago when he couldn't manage his finances and simply needed some assistance. I'd been handling the taxes, loans, and investments discreetly and competently, never asking for credit. Now I was withdrawing my name from all lodgements, writing a formal revocation letter, and making it official. As I worked, something unexpected came up. not rage or despair, but relief. Every time I clicked confirm, it seemed like a weight was lifted piece by piece. However, I wasn't rushing. No angry emails, no big confrontations, just a steady, deliberate, silent withdrawal, like the tide receding before the storm. I knew they would not notice at first. That was the beauty of it. They were accustomed to the support being unobtrusive, automatic, and effortless. They wouldn't understand what had happened until the cracks appeared. The water turned off in the middle of the shower. The internet went down during the big game, and the mortgage company left a voicemail they couldn't miss. The next morning, Petra texted me, "It's for dinner. I suppose you could have at least laughed at Dad's joke." Is this a joke? I didn't respond. I just opened the final file, one they had no idea existed, and checked the numbers. Then I began composing a message, not for them, to somebody else. And that's when the plan truly began. It was a note for my lawyer, Maura, the same one who helped me start my business when I was just a freelancer with a refurbished laptop and a dream. Maura is a bright woman who does not blink when a client says, "I think I want to quietly dismantle a financial arrangement with my family." She is also thorough. She reminded me of every shared duty, every blind signature I'd given them in confidence, and every legal link that still connected me to people who regarded me as a walking pocketbook. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" she inquired during a late-night Zoom conversation. "You've been cleaning up after them for years." "I'm not cleaning up anymore," I announced. "I'm walking away, but I'm doing it clean." The following week became a checklist of quiet ends. The family phone plan was separated. I created new lines in their names and included a 30-day notice in the fine print of an email they were likely to disregard. The shared insurance coverage removed me. What about my father's spare credit card, which he had been using just in emergencies? Gone. I even marked the auto renewals on my mother's makeup subscriptions, which she had always thought I was willing to cover. Each work brought a sense of clarity that I had not felt in years. Not really revenge or spite, but rather a deliberate, meticulous reclaiming of boundaries that should never have been violated in the first place. Then came the home. Technically, it was still in my name. I acquired it outright 5 years ago following my first major software contract. I told them it was a gift even though I maintained the deed in my LLC for liability reasons. I'd paid the taxes, the maintenance, and the idiotic landscaper whom my father refused to fire even after he destroyed the sprinkler system. But I want it back. I did not want to kick them out. Not yet. But I wanted them to understand it was never fully theirs. That every inch of drywall, carpet, and ceiling fan belonged to me. I could sell it, lease it, bulldoze it, and build a parking lot if I chose. That's when Maura revealed the property audit clause in the LLC agreement, which allowed me to request a comprehensive inspection, reassessment, and even a temporary suspension of residency if necessary. "You really want to go that far?" she inquired. "I want them to stop pretending they built the roof they're sitting under." We scheduled the audit quietly and legally. A letter has been mailed, certified. It will arrive within 3 days. On the surface, nothing appeared to change. I continued to use one-word responses in the family group chat. I still appreciated the occasional Instagram picture featuring my mother's garden, still fulfilled the part of the calm, trustworthy son. But within, I was counting down. The first crack occurred on day 4. Mom called me at 7:42 a.m. I didn't respond. Her voicemail was lengthy and rambling, something about the sprinklers being turned off mid-cycle and a man in a suit going about the backyard taking notes. She was simply asking whether I knew anything about it. I did not call back. By the end of the week, Petra had shared this intriguing story on Instagram. "Some people forget who was present when they had nothing. Don't worry, we remember." The irony made me giggle in the dark at 2 a.m. while drinking coffee in the apartment they hadn't seen since I moved out. Then came the second call, this one from Dad. He did not leave a voicemail, but instead texted, "We need to talk. Someone from the city was asking inquiries." That was not true. The guy was not from the city. He was a private inspector. I knew, because I had hired him. Marcus's name was Marcus, and he was an expert at his work. His report arrived the next morning, a 68-page document detailing every code infraction, undocumented remodeling, and financial discrepancy involving the property. Apparently, a dad had rented out the guest house to one of his poker cronies for money. They hadn't told me, had not reported it, just pocketed the money and claimed it as a favor on my property with my name on the liability line. That's when the gears really started turning. I carefully crafted the next email, send it to Mora in a single line, activate the eviction clause quietly, but even so, I was not unkind. I offered them 30 days, which was more than enough time to organize their affairs, move, downsize, and realize that maybe, just maybe, calling me the dumb one at that dinner table wasn't worth losing their roof over their heads. Still, I did not tell them explicitly, not yet. Instead, I got on with my life, business meetings, gym workouts, and dinner with Pauls. I even went to Petra's old campus just for fun. I walked past the buildings she used to brag about. I recalled all the times she deemed me unqualified because I hadn't traversed those same halls. Then on day 12, I received an email from Mom. The subject line just said, "Lel, the body was short. No hello, no greetings, just we received the notice." I do not comprehend. Why are you doing this? I stared at it for Atimi. My fingers hovered above the keyboard and then I wrote the sentence that he didn't expect because you mistook me generosity for stupidity and I'm not foolish enough to put up with it anymore. I pressed send. The response arrived within an hour. This is not from but from Dad. I'm not sure what I expected. Perhaps an apology. He reluctantly admitted that he had crossed a line. Instead, there was a wall-off deflection. He began with, "This is so very acting," followed by a guilt trip about how family always sticks together. He then switched to what he felt was a trump card. "If we hadn't reared you, you wouldn't have any money to fling around." I read that section twice. Then again, just to make sure. Raise me. This dad forgot about my high school graduations. He was on a fishing trip. Who encouraged me to get over it when I called crying after being fired from my first job. This individual believed he was entitled to credit for my accomplishments, as if his silence, dismissiveness, and relentless sundacun constituted support. I didn't respond. I forwarded the email to Mora and urged her to direct all future communications through legal means. From that point forward, I stopped playing the obedient son. I was suddenly the legal property owner, a client, and an adult with limits and consequences to enforce them. Things went quiet for a few days after that, strangely silent, quiet enough to make your skin crawl. I could feel the tension mounting like a pressure cooker about to explode. I knew me family. They were not the type to go down gracefully. They'd beg, guilt trip, and maybe even threaten. But would they apologize for their actions? That would entail admitting they were wrong. Nothing worried them more than low-sync delusion that they were always correct. On day 17, Petra arrived at my office. I'm not sure how she found Thedris. I had never informed her where I worked and it was not public. Whether she was in the foyer speaking to the receptionist as if she owned that place. I froze when I saw her through the glass wall. She seemed different, less haughty and more needy. Lel. Share marked as I answered the door. Can we talk? Just 5 minutes, please. I did not welcome her in. I just stood in the corridor, arms folded, face blank. She sighed and adjusted her weight as if considering whether to feint a tear. Look, I get it. They were harsh. Dad was out of line. But this is extreme. You think this is extreme? I inquired, keeping my tone low, taking back what's mine. There are parents, she added as if that resolved anything. I laughed quickly and sharply. Funny, you only say when it's convenient, when I'm footing the bill. She stared at me and for the first time I noticed it, not anger, pity or fear, real terror. She understood I wasn't lying. They don't have anywhere to go, she explained. You can't just throw them out. They had 5 years to build a safety net. I told them. I gave them everything and they spit on every chance they had. This isn't vengeance, Petra. It's me choosing peace. She began to fight, but I was down. I turned and returned to my office, leaving her standing in the hallway. My assistant inquired whether I wanted her escorted away. I shake my head. Let her sit with it. Let her explain to Mom and Dad why their golden goose finally stopped laying eggs. On day 20, the fissures were no longer subtle. Dad called from an unknown phone number and left a voicemail. I'm not asking for much, just time. Just don't do anything drastic. You're better than this. Then a text from Mom. We're family. This isn't who you are, but it was. Or more accurately who I had become. Someone who finally realized that being family did not imply Bangsamin's doormat. That blood was not an excuse for treason disguised as tradition. On day 24, Maura called. They filed a complaint, she explained. They're claiming emotional distress, trying to block the eviction, but it won't hold. You've got everything commitment. This was years in theme making. Lel. I nodded slowly despite the fact that she could not see me. Let them squirm, I replied. Let them feel what it's like to be uncertain, to not know when the rug might be pulled. It was nasty perhaps, but not nearly as terrible as the years I spent being invisible, except when someone needed a favor, or a last-minute rescue. On day 28, I drove by the house on suggest to see. The lawn was overgrown. The lights are off. A for rent sign sat uncomfortably in the yard, possibly hoping to buy them sometime, but Nabo Dai was going to bite. Not while the autotrepper is flying about. I rolled down the window and sat there silently. The weight of everything has now hit me. This was the house I had provided them. I believed this place would bring you closer, but it wasn't about the house, or money, or even the absence of degree. It was about respect. They had run out of it. Then, as I was about to drive away, my phone vibrated. Petra sent a new message. The message sat licky a weight in my hand. You might want to call me home. Something happened. Something bad. I read it again. Home. That word affected me, curled my lip and stiffened me jaw. That place had stopped being home. When they made it plain that I'd never be more than a walking ATM with a blank resume. Nevertheless, I could ignore it. Not because I cared what Petra had to say, but because if anything went wrong, I wanted to make sure it wasn't blamed on me. I drove excellently, the headlights cutting through the dusk like a knife. My stomach churned during the voyage, not due to worry or anticipation. A part of me buried beneath years of obligation and silence desire to battle. I wanted them to attempt playing the victims one more time so I could finally completely and publicly cut the cord. When I pulled up to the house, I sensed something was wrong right away. There were two cars in the driveway that I did not recognize. One of them resembled a contractor's van. The other was a silver sedan with insignia partially hanging off. The porch light was turned off, which was unusual because Mom had usually insisted on leaving it on just in case company comes by. I got out of my car, and the warm night air felt heavier than it should have. As I approached, I noticed Editra on the front steps, arms wrapped around her knees, appearing little in a way that contradicted her typical position of smug confidence. She stewed when she saw me, pushing her hair away from her face, and whispered quietly, "You're not going to believe it. I'll be the judge of that," I stated bluntly. "Where's Mom and Dad?" She paused. "Inside, talking to the guy from the bank." I blinked. "The bank?" she nodded, her eyes wide. Apparently Dad tried to take out another loan against property before the eviction notice went through. They claimed it was only a bureaucratic delay. He figured he could flip the guest house for a fast profit, and then I felt a chill run down my spine. But he does not own the house. Ido, his name is not on the deed. Exactly. She inhaled forcefully. The bank uncovered it before the payments cleared. But there is now a fraud alert in the property. They're sending Somi and Nate to assess the next steps. He could have just committed mortgage fraud. Nate. It did not speak. Can't really. My mind was already thinking 10 steps ahead. Liabilities, paperwork, lawsuits, and image control. Where's he now? In inquired. Inside, she said this time quietly, yelling. I stepped past her, opening the door without knocking. Inside, it appeared as if a bomb had gone off, not physically but emotionally. Papers were strewn on the dining table, cabinets were left open, and cups were half filled on the counters. Dad stood in the middle of it all, red-faced and swinging his arms, arguing with a man in a navy blazer who held a folder and a clipboard. You don't get it, Dad snapped. This whole thing is just a misunderstanding. My son owns the place. It's all family. There was no fraud. Theman did not flinch. Sir, you filed legal documentation declaring ownership of a property that, according to county records, is wholly owned by Lel Elizond is described as a business entity. You provided falsified documentation. I didn't forget anything. Dad snapped. I just made some copies, adjusted some dates. That's not the same. I cleared my throat loudly enough to make both of them pause. Dad turned, his face devoid of color. Lel, he muttered, his voice lowering like a stone. Good. You can explain. Tell him it's fine. We're family. I stared at him, at the father who raised me with backhanded praise and repeated reminders that I was never intelligent enough to succeed. At the man who had just risked jail time biasing my name to extend his fantasy life based on my generosity. No, I said quietly. I won't be explaining anything. You're on your own. The man in the blazer gave me a respectful nod. Mr. Ellis, I assume you were aware of the attempted second mortgage application. Just found out, I said. And I'll be consulting my attorney immediately. If there's any liability being considered her, I'll need a formal report from my records. I can get you a copy, he replied, turning open his folder. It's not pretty. Dad stepped forward, panic seeping through his tough guy persona. Come on, Lel, don't do this. You know I didn't mean any harm. I just needed time. Time? I repeated. Like the years I gave you while you ridiculed me. Like the dinners where you laughed about my lack of a degree while spending the money I earned. That kind of time. Mother arrived in the corridor behind him, arms crossed and face inscrutable. She didn't say anything or defend herself. She simply watched. Petra came in a bit later, hesitating awkwardly in the entryway. For once, she had nothing sarcastic to contribute. No smug grin. There's no half-joke to relieve the tension. I strolled into the kitchen, admiring the granite countertops and the glass backsplash Mom had chosen from a magazine I bought for. I opened the refrigerator, which was empty, save for a bottle of wine and a takeaway carton. There was no thank you message, no reminder that this was my place. I came back to them and replied, I will give you till the end of the week, after which the locks will change. If you're still here, I'll have the sheriff lead you out. Oh, and any legal ramifications from your little loan prank are your own. Dad opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. We're done here. I walked out before they could say anything else, closed the door behind me, and got into my car. I sat for a minute, watching the front lights turn on. Perhaps Mom had finally moved. Maybe Petra flipped a switch on the way out. Then my phone vibrated again. This time, there was a voicemail, not from Petra or Mom, but from someone I had not heard from in years. And as I listened to it, I knew the family drama wasn't over yet. It was my Uncle Virgil. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 10 years, not since the last family reunion, when he caught me behind the grill with a paper plate in hand and murmured, "You're not like the rest of them. You know that, right?" He was Dad's older brother, and the family's black sheep, long before I became one. A mechanic who did not attend college, divorced twice, and lived in a camper by the lake. But somehow he'd always made more sense to me than anyone else with our surname. His message was quiet, harsh, and straightforward. Hey Nate, I heard what's going on from Petra, and I know they've done you wrong. I warned you years ago that they only love what you give them, not who you are. If you need assistance with the mess, or if you simply want to relax on a dock with a beer and say nothing, you have a spot here. They don't get to define you longer. Let them drown in what they created. I stared at the screen for a long time. After the message was over, it was not the words. It was the simplicity, the lack of guilt, and the serene acceptance. I had no idea how much I needed that until I heard it from someone who wasn't asking for anything. The final week was like a storm surge. Dad tried everything. Emails, phone calls, even stopping by my place with a cooler full of steaks and a sheepish grin, as if we could somehow cook the tension away. I did not answer the door. I didn't respond. I sent every communication directly to Maura. Mom's tone also changed. Her text progressed from confusion to guilt, then desperation. You're scaring us. This isn't like you. We're losing everything. But the irony is that it had always been mine. They were only now recognizing this. By Friday afternoon, the movers I hired, not theirs, had arrived at the house. I ensured they were professional, careful, and considerate. I didn't want their belongings harmed. I simply wanted them gone. I stood in the driveway while the boxes were loaded into the vehicle. Dad sat silently on the porch, arms resting on his knees, as if he just learned the game was ended and he'd been betting with chips he never owned. Mom was inside arguing with the lead mover about what constitutes essentials. Petra didn't appear. She stopped responding altogether after attempting to borrow $5 just until I figure things out. By 3:00 p.m., the house was completely vacant. The locks were changed. The title was being transferred to a rental firm that I trusted. I had already interviewed 3 tenants. One was a single mother with a daughter who wanted to grow tomatoes in her backyard. I agreed right away. As the movers drove away, Dad finally rose up and approached me. "Lel," he muttered, his voice cracking for the first time in perhaps forever. "Can I just ask you one thing?" I did not respond, just looked at him. He paused. "Why'd you wait so long to cut us off?" I let the silence continue. Then I said, "Because I believed you might change. I hoped that if I offered enough, you'd view me as a son, not a resource, not the dumb one, just me." He looked away. "You were wrong," he stated gently. "I know," I said, "but not anymore." I got into my car and drove away without looking back. No spectacular exits or parting shots, just tranquility. The following several months were the quietest in my life. No calls, no chaos, no urgent needs for assistance disguised as family bonding. The new occupants have moved in. I stopped checking the family group chat. No one had posted in it since the locks were changed. The silence seemed unusual at first, but it grew on me. A few weeks later, on a Saturday morning, I traveled to the lake. Uncle Virgil greeted me at the pier with 2 drinks, a smirk, and a nod. As if no time had passed, we sat on the worn seat and watched the ripples spread across the water. "You all right?" he inquired, popping open his can. I nodded. "I am now." And for the first time in years, I was not lying.